Hello, and welcome to our video looking at World War I in AP European history. In this video, we'll look at some of the important battles fought in World War I, the experience of total war, the use of propaganda, how women were impacted by World War I, different conflicts that happen within the war, and then the ultimate results of World War I. So let's go ahead and start with the important battles and kind of what life was like fighting in World War I. Or the Great War, as they called it at the time, because they didn't realize in just a few short decades that there would be another large scale global conflict about to happen. So, the first thing we'll look at is trench warfare and kind of the fighting style that the Great War had that made it very different from previous conflicts. We talked about the advancements in military technology in an earlier video, but just to kind of reiterate here that these new weapons make for very different wartime conditions. So the advances in machine guns and poison gas and tanks, make it harder for you to launch like ground assaults. So people started digging these trenches to try to protect themselves. And in a lot of ways, World War I really emphasizes that people were really on the defense over the offense. And there was a high number of casualties kind of because of this. The soldiers, of course, especially in the Western Front, they're living in trenches. And these trenches stretch hundreds of miles. And the soldiers are living in really harsh, unsanitary conditions within those trenches, leading to things like trench foot. There's rats the size of like rabbits. It's just awful. And it leads to a lot of PTSD for these soldiers living in those conditions for such a long time. And ultimately, this leads to a stalemate where we have this massive loss of life for very minimal territory gains. Now, this all kind of starts with the Schlieffen Plan, which is Germany's plan at the start of the war. And their idea was that they were just going to like quickly go through Belgium, take over France, and basically kind of like render France neutral. And it would end the war really fast because of this, and it would prevent a two-front war. But it doesn't work. They face a lot of resistance in France, and it draws Great Britain into the war because Britain is still France's ally. And so they start to see that the trenches get dug to create the Western Front in France because of the Schlieffen Plan, invading of France. Now, the Battle of Marne really marks the actual failure of the Schlieffen Plan because remember, they wanted to quickly invade France and then turn around and go quickly invade Russia so that they didn't have to fight a two front war. But basically, with the Battle of Marne, is that the British came to help the French and it halts Russian advancement. And that's where we start to see the settling of the Western Front. And this is one of the earliest kind of battles fought in World War I. And it really solidifies that trench warfare and it sets up that kind of what will be a two front war for Germany. Next up, let's look at the Battle of Verdun. So Verdun is fought from February to December of 1916. So you heard that right. This is one battle that lasts 10 months, and it's one of the longest and bloodiest battles of World War I, taking place between France and Germany on the Western Front. And the whole strategy for Germany was they were trying to what's called bleed France white by launching this massive assault onto this historic fortress city in Verdun, knowing that the French would like feel obligated to really protect this city because of its like historical kind of precedence. So the French do that. They have this kind of national determination around protecting this city, and over 700,000 casualties are suffered from both sides during this like horrific conflict. And that's just between the trenches and like the constant artillery bombardments. And at the end of this, the front lines really change very little. France manages to hold on to Verdun, and the German offensive like actually fails, but the battle really just shows the brutal war of attrition that basically, defines World War One. This idea that it's just trying to outlast the other side. Nobody's really gaining anything by winning. And then with kind of similar themes here, the Battle of the Somme. The Somme also, it lasts a long time. This one's from July to November of 1916, so several months worth of time. This one's one of the most deadly casualty rates in all of British history in particular. Britain suffered throughout this entire battle about 60,000 casualties, but they lost 20,000 people on one day. And this battle, we look at it, it's got about 1 million casualties altogether through both sides. And the Allies do end up winning this, but I mean, it's kind of one of those things, it's like at what cost? They gain roughly 5 miles worth of territory and they lose this many lives. Which brings us to, how do countries keep these efforts going for this long with that kind of result in the battlefield? And the answer to that is total war. And total war is just this idea that basically everyone in your country is involved in some way to this devotion to winning the war, whether that's, your changing things in your economy to center around the war. Your factories that used to make clothing for retail are now making clothing for soldiers, things like that. You've got different people entering the workforce, especially women. Propaganda is used really frequently to exaggerate facts, and it's meant to influence civilians that this is all worthwhile expense. Like we're doing this for the good of the country. So let's take a look at some of that propaganda and see what it looked like. Governments were really utilizing propaganda during this time period to help shape public opinion because, one, it helped mobilize societies for this total war. You had to have everybody on your side to be able to make something like that function. But also, it's going to spread a lot of misinformation and deepen the hatred between different nations. So, just this idea that, like in Britain, you're getting all this really negative German propaganda, for example. But propaganda is meant to do a few different things. It's meant to boost morale, encourage enlistment and recruitment, promote things like rationing and conservation during the war. And then it's also supposed to kind of like bring a lot of like emotion to you when you see it. So when you see these posters with this patriotic imagery in your newspaper, in different pamphlets, in songs, in public speeches, it's meant to really draw you in and feel like you're part of this something larger than yourself. So here's some examples for you of different recruitment propaganda from the time period. We've got some from Britain, some from the United States, and even some from Germany, just to kind of show you what they were trying to get across. Next, we'll look at how women participated in World War One. Women, it turns out, were extremely important to the war effort. They filled a lot of roles traditionally held by men. And when this fighting and the casualty rates are so high and the fighting's going on for so long, they really did not have very many able bodied young men left in places like Britain, France, and Germany, or even the Soviet Union to you know, fill these jobs. So women really had to step up in a lot of ways they'd never had to before. And so they took jobs in factories and public transportation and farming, even doing some like administrative work. And the governments are really going to rely very heavily on women to maintain industrial and economic output. It's the only way that they can win with this total war effort. So we see women gain a lot from this. They gain this sense of independence and purpose that really challenges a lot of those pre-gender norms from the before the war. We also start to see a lot of women volunteering for military support roles for the first time. So we see lots of different nursing organizations be developed. Women will be, telegraph operators, ambulance drivers, and even like a little Army Auxiliary Corps were created for women specifically. And they actually are going to be pretty near the front lines in a lot of situations. And so all of this kind of contributes to the call for women's suffrage. Women have been advocating for this since the Enlightenment, but now it's going to gain a lot more widespread support. And right after World War One, we'll see a lot of these Western countries are soon going to grant women's suffrage. Okay, next we're going to look at some different conflicts that are going to happen within World War One itself. So not actual battles being fought, but different things happening in countries that are participating that will add to kind of general conflict and disruption. Now, this first one is the Russian Revolution, and we'll talk a lot more about this in a later video, but basically just need to know that Tsar Nicholas is overthrown in the middle of World War One, and his whole family is assassinated. The people that will take charge are the Bolsheviks, who seize power of Russia, and we get the very early stages of communism in Russia. And one of the biggest things to come out of this is that they sign what's called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, where they agree to exit the war. The war is very unpopular in Russia. Their leaders signed this to get out. And because of that, they have to give up a lot of land to Germany in exchange for peace. And so this kind of shows you where the map is at this point in time, right there by the Russian Revolution. Another important thing happening during the war is the flu pandemic of 1918. So, this is the largest flu pandemic in world history. About 500 million people were infected globally. It gets the nickname the Spanish flu. And they estimate that between 50 to 100 million people died because of the Spanish flu. It was very deadly. It's happening kind of all over the Western world at this point. It's in the United States, it's in Europe. So that's something that will be impacting the home front as well as the war front. Then we've got the Easter Rebellion. So this is going to be conflict happening within Great Britain itself, and this is around Ireland. So Irish nationalists, they see the war as an opportunity to claim independence from the United Kingdom. Ireland's wanted independence for quite a while now. They've tried a few times and it didn't work out. So these uprisings, unfortunately for them, were not very coordinated. They did not result in immediate independence for Ireland, but it did cause quite a bit of a distraction for the British as they were trying to kind of crush this rebellion as well as keep participating in the war effort. Ireland will get their independence from the UK, but it won't be until after World War II. And then another tragedy going on during this time is the Armenian genocide. So this kind of happens right there in the middle of World War I as well, where the Ottoman government, they ally against the Armenian Christians living in their territory, and they ultimately commit genocide against the Armenian people. Their case will be used along with the Holocaust after World War II to actually coin the term genocide, the just deliberate killing and kind of erasing of an entire group of people and culture. And so, because of this, we see that there's a diaspora of Armenians all over the globe because those that could get out did get out. The country of Turkey today still does not recognize that it was a genocide. Okay, let's start to wrap this up and talk about what are some of the results of the war. The war officially ends on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m. It's known as Armistice Day, and it's a great day of celebration throughout Europe. By the end of the war, this is the casualty count that we're looking at, with Russia and Germany, Austria, Hungary kind of suffering the worst, with France pretty, not too far behind. So we'll talk a little bit more about the implications of that at a later time. Some of the most important impacts, though, are these. Number one, the war really changes the balance of power in Europe. The United States becomes kind of a major world power, but then retreats into isolationism and doesn't really want to participate in anything happening in Europe. European monarchs are basically all pretty much gone. There's a few exceptions, like Britain, for example, but they're really just a kind of figurehead at this point. We start to see that they've lost all power, and in their place, we see some representative governments, but largely a lot of them are replaced by kind of more dictatorships, which we'll talk about later as well. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, and the Ottoman Empire are now all officially dissolved, and there are a bunch of new states there that are going to take their place. And all of this really culminates to an end at the Paris Peace Conference, where they sign what's called the Treaty of Versailles, which again, we'll talk a lot more about in depth in a later video. But the extent to it is really that Germany gets blamed for the war, and most of the clauses within that treaty have Germany kind of at fault, having to pay back the extreme debt that they've put the Allies in. It breaks up their empire. And the whole point of it is really to make sure that Germany does not rise like that again. Okay, and that's where we'll leave off today. Thanks for watching.